They say that immortality is a curse. A lonely road stretching endlessly into the darkness. But what if that darkness found purpose? What if eternity became something worth living for? This is the story of Dorian Kith, the vampire who became known as the Nocturnal Protector, a being who traded his isolation for an oath that would span generations, watching over a single family through the rising and falling of empires, through wars and peace, through birth and death. But every oath has an origin. Every promise begins with a moment that changes everything. The year was 1723. The Industrial Revolution was still decades away, and the cobblestone streets of London were lit only by oil lamps and moonlight. It was in these shadows that Dorian Kith had existed for nearly 3 centuries, a predator among the unsuspecting, a ghost story whispered in taverns. Dorian had long since forgotten what it meant to feel. 300 years of existence had stripped away his humanity like layers of paint peeling from an old canvas. He fed when hunger demanded. He moved through the world like smoke, touching nothing, connecting with no one. That night everything changed. He was hunting near the Thames when he heard the struggle. 3 men had cornered someone in a narrow alley between 2 warehouses. Normally, Dorian would have passed by. Human affairs were no longer his concern, but something made him pause. Perhaps it was the desperation in the victim's voice. Perhaps it was simply boredom after 3 centuries of the same routines. The victim was a young woman, no more than 25, with auburn hair that caught what little moonlight penetrated the alley. She fought like a wildcat, refusing to submit even as the men tore at her cloak. "Please," she gasped. "I have nothing of value. I'm just a seamstress." "That's not what we're after, love," one of the thugs sneered. Dorian moved before he consciously decided to. He was there, then gone, then there again. The 3 men never saw him coming. Within seconds, they lay unconscious on the wet cobblestones, their minds erased of the last 10 minutes of memory. The woman stared at him, her green eyes wide with shock and something else. Not fear but recognition. As if she had been waiting for him. "You're him," she whispered. "The shadow that walks the night. The ghost of Whitechapel." Dorian's eyes narrowed. "You should run." "I won't." She straightened her torn dress with trembling hands, but her voice was steady. "I know what you are. I've been searching for you for months. Then you're a fool. I could kill you before you drew your next breath. But you won't." She took a step closer, and Dorian found himself fascinated by her complete lack of fear. "Because you just saved me. Because somewhere beneath the monster, there's still something human." "You're wrong." "Am I?" She smiled then, and it transformed her face. "My name is Charlotte Jones. And I need your help." Dorian should have left. Should have vanished into the night and forgotten this strange, fearless woman. But curiosity, that most human of traits, held him in place. "Speak quickly." Charlotte pulled a folded letter from her bodice, miraculously undamaged in the struggle. "My younger brother, Thomas, is dying. Consumption. The doctors say he has weeks, perhaps days. But I've read the old texts, the forbidden books in my late father's library. Remedies. Dark remedies. A single drop of vampire blood, diluted in wine, can cure any human illness. Those texts are fairy tales." "Are they?" She met his eyes. "Then why are you afraid to try?" "I'm not afraid." But Dorian felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in decades. Interest. Purpose. "Even if it were true, why would I help you?" "Because I'm offering you something in return. Something you haven't had in a very long time." Charlotte's voice softened. "I'm offering you a reason to exist beyond feeding and hiding. Help me save my brother, and I'll give you something to protect. Someone to care for. A family that will remember you not as a monster, but as a guardian." The words hit Dorian like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had seen him as anything other than a creature to fear? When had he last mattered to someone? "You don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking." Charlotte extended her hand. "1 drop of blood to save Thomas." In exchange, you gain my family's loyalty forever. We'll be your anchor to humanity, your purpose, and perhaps your redemption." Dorian stared at her hand for a long moment. He thought of the endless years stretching before him, identical and meaningless. He thought of the emptiness that had become his existence. Then he took her hand. "One drop," he said. "But if I do this, I swear an oath. I will protect the Jones family and all who descend from your line, for as long as blood runs in their veins. Through every generation, through every danger, I will be there. This I vow." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "And we vow to remember you, to honor you, to be worthy of your protection." Thomas Jones recovered within 3 days. The transformation was miraculous. The gray pallor left his skin, the rattling cough ceased, and strength returned to his wasted limbs. Charlotte never told him the true source of his cure, spinning instead a tale of a rare medicine from the East. But Thomas was not stupid. He saw how his sister spoke of the shadow man, who visited their modest home only after sunset. He saw how Charlotte always kept a room ready, always left the window unlatched on the 3rd floor. When Thomas was well enough to walk, he climbed to that room one evening and found Dorian standing at the window, looking out over London's smoking chimneys. "You saved my life," Thomas said simply. "Your sister saved your life. I merely provided the means. Then you saved Charlotte's life that night in the alley." Thomas moved to stand beside him. "She told me everything. About the oath you swore." Dorian glanced at the young man, barely 18, with his sister's green eyes and their father's strong jaw. "Does it frighten you, having a monster as a guardian? Are you a monster?" Thomas considered the question seriously. Monsters don't keep their promises. Monsters don't save people they have no reason to save. You're something else. Something in between. Over the following months, Dorian found himself drawn into the Jones household in ways he never expected. Charlotte was building her seamstress business into something substantial, and she had a gift for making Dorian feel less like an outsider and more like an eccentric uncle. Thomas pursued studies in law, often staying up late into the night to discuss philosophy and ethics with Dorian. The vampire found himself remembering what it was like to have companions, to engage in conversations that didn't revolve around hunting or hiding. But the true test of his oath came in 1731. Charlotte had married by then a good man named Marcus Hartley, a merchant with kind eyes and a generous spirit. She was pregnant with their first child when Marcus's business partners betrayed him, framing him for smuggling to steal his assets. Marcus was arrested and sentenced to hang within the week. Charlotte came to Dorian's room, tears streaming down her face. "Please. You swore to protect the Jones family. Marcus's family now. My child will need a father. What do you ask of me? Help him escape. Use your powers. I know you can move unseen, manipulate minds. Please, Dorian. I'm begging you." Dorian had never used his abilities for anything beyond survival and feeding. But an oath was an oath. The night before Marcus's execution, Dorian infiltrated Newgate prison. He moved through shadows, his presence a whisper of cold air. The guards saw nothing, remembered nothing. He found Marcus in his cell, broken and resigned to death. "Who?" Marcus started. "Charlotte's friend." "Be silent." Dorian snapped the chains as easily as breaking thread. "We have minutes before the next patrol. I can't escape. They'll hunt me down. They'll punish Charlotte. No one will hunt you because you won't escape." Dorian's eyes glowed in the darkness. "You'll die tonight, Marcus Hartley. The guards will find your body in the morning, dead of a heart attack. Charlotte will grieve publicly and properly. I don't understand. But Marcus Hartley will rise again under a new name. Marcus Mason, merchant newly arrived from the colonies. You'll live in a different district, rebuild under Charlotte's guidance. I've already arranged the documents and the story." Marcus stared at him. "Why would you do this?" "Because I swore an oath. Because your wife saved me from myself. Because your child deserves a father. Dorian guided him toward the window. Now move quickly. And Marcus. Charlotte will explain everything. Trust her. And trust that as long as I exist, no harm will come to your family. The plan worked flawlessly. Marcus was reborn as Marcus Mason. His death never questioned. Charlotte gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, and she grew up hearing stories of the mysterious Uncle Dorian, who visited only at night and never aged. Catherine Mason grew to be as fearless as her mother, with her father's business acumen and a curiosity that both delighted and terrified Dorian. She was the first of many Jones descendants who would test the boundaries of his oath. Catherine married a firebrand named Jonathan Bryce, a printer who published pamphlets advocating for political reform and workers' rights. Their passionate arguments about liberty and justice often lasted until dawn, with Dorian observing from the shadows, secretly amused by Catherine's spirit. They had 3 children, 2 sons, William and James, and a daughter named Grace. It was Grace who captured Dorian's attention most, a quiet, thoughtful child who showed no fear of him whatsoever. "Why don't you die, Uncle Dorian?" Grace asked one evening when she was 7, with the blunt honesty only children possess. "Because I'm already dead, little one. I died a very long time ago. But you're not gone. So you must still be alive." Grace considered this puzzle. "I think dying and being gone are different things. Grandmama Charlotte died, but she's not really gone because we remember her. You're still here, so you must be more alive than dead." The simple wisdom of it struck Dorian deeply. From that moment, Grace became special to him in a way even Charlotte hadn't been. She reminded him why he'd taken the oath in the first place. When the American Revolution sent shockwaves through England in 1776, Jonathan's political activities attracted dangerous attention. Government agents raided their printing shop, and Jonathan was marked as a traitor. The family had to flee London in the dead of night. Dorian arranged everything: passage to Edinburgh under false names, a new printing business established through his wealth, guards he could trust to watch over them during daylight hours. He traveled with them, a shadow no one saw but everyone sensed. In Scotland, the Bryce family rebuilt their lives. William became a doctor. James followed his father into printing, and Grace surprised everyone by falling in love with a soldier named Robert Johnson. "He's going to war," Grace told Dorian the night before her wedding. She was 23, beautiful in her simple wedding dress. "The French wars are expanding. Robert has to go. I cannot follow him onto a battlefield in daylight, Grace." "I know." She took his cold hand in her warm ones. "I'm not asking you to save him. I know the oath is to protect the family, not to make us immune to the world. But if he dies, promise me you'll help me raise our child. Promise me you won't let me face that darkness alone. You have my word. Always." Robert Johnson died at the Battle of Alexandria in 1801. Grace was pregnant with their son, Nathaniel, when the news arrived. True to his word, Dorian was there through her grief, a constant presence in the shadows. He was there when Nathaniel was born, ensuring the midwife was skilled and the birth went safely. He was there through Nathaniel's childhood, teaching the boy to read, to think critically, to question the world. Grace never remarried. She told Dorian once, decades later, that she'd had the great love of her life in Robert, and the great friendship of her life in him. She needed nothing more. When Grace died in 1837 at the age of 61, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Dorian felt the loss like a physical wound. She had been the first to truly understand him, to see him as something beyond his curse. As he stood in the shadows at her funeral, watching her family mourn, he realized something profound. He was no longer protecting this family out of obligation to an oath. He loved them. They had become his family in truth. Nathaniel Johnson carried his mother's wisdom and his father's courage. He became a barrister, defending the poor and powerless in London's courts. He married a teacher named Elizabeth Montgomery, and together they had 5 children. It was during this generation that Dorian faced perhaps his greatest challenge. The year was 1853, and London was in the grip of a cholera outbreak. The disease ravaged the poor neighborhoods where Nathaniel's family chose to live, working alongside those they served. One by one, Nathaniel's children fell ill. First the youngest, Mary. Then the twins, Edward and Edmund. Then Samuel. Finally, even Nathaniel himself took to his bed, the telltale symptoms appearing overnight. Elizabeth came to Dorian in tears. "You saved Thomas all those years ago with your blood. Could you?" "One drop saved one man because his illness was of the lungs, not contagion," Dorian said gently. "Cholera is different. If I gave my blood to all of them, I don't know what it would do. The transformation could kill them faster than the disease. Then what can we do? Watch them die." Dorian thought of Grace, of Eleanor, of all the promises made across the generations. "There's a doctor, Snow. He believes the disease spreads through water, not air. If he's right, moving your family away from the contaminated source could save them. But Nathaniel is too weak to move. Then I'll move him myself. Elizabeth, gather what you need. We leave tonight." Under cover of darkness, Dorian moved the entire family to a country estate he owned in Surrey, far from London's tainted water supplies. He hired the best nurses money could buy, ensured fresh water from deep wells, and watched over them with tireless vigilance. 4 of the 5 children survived. Little Mary, the youngest at only 3 years old, slipped away despite everything. Nathaniel recovered, broken-hearted but alive. "You saved most of us," he told Dorian. "But not all. Does that mean you failed your oath?" "Yes," Dorian said quietly. "I failed Mary." "No." Nathaniel gripped his hand. "You gave her every chance. You moved heaven and earth to save us. The oath was never about preventing death. That's impossible even for you. It was about standing with us through the darkness. And you've done that. You're doing that now." The surviving children grew up with a profound respect for life's fragility and the guardian who watched over them. Edmund became a doctor, driven by Mary's death to save others. Edward studied engineering, helping design London's improved water systems. Samuel entered the church, finding solace in faith. But it was Nathaniel's daughter, Adelaide, who would test Dorian's oath in an entirely different way. Adelaide Johnson was born in 1855, 2 years after Mary's death. Perhaps because she never knew her sister, or perhaps simply because of her nature, Adelaide grew up fearless and rebellious. She refused to marry, instead joining the early suffragette movement and organizing protests for women's rights. In 1885, at the age of 30, Adelaide was arrested during a demonstration and sentenced to 6 months in Holloway Prison. "Let her serve her time," Nathaniel urged Dorian. "She chose this path. She knew the consequences." "She's being beaten by the guards," Dorian replied coldly. "She's being force-fed when she refuses to eat. This is not justice. It's torture. If you break her out, you'll make her a fugitive. You'll ruin her cause. If I leave her, she may not survive." Dorian's eyes flashed. "Your grandmother made me swear to protect this family. Adelaide is family. I will protect her." But Adelaide surprised them both. When Dorian appeared in her cell, ready to free her, she refused. "No," she said through split lips and bruised cheeks. "If you remove me, my sacrifice means nothing. Women are watching what happens here. If I endure, I prove we're as strong as any man. If I run, I prove we need male protection." "Adelaide, I don't need you to save me, Uncle Dorian. I need you to witness. Tell my story. Make sure the world knows what's happening here. That's how you protect me now. Through truth, not rescue." Dorian had lived for over 500 years, but he had never felt more humbled than in that moment. Adelaide taught him that protection sometimes meant stepping back, bearing witness, honoring the strength of those you loved rather than imposing your own power. He did as she asked. Through carefully placed allies in the press, Adelaide's story spread. The brutality of the prison system was exposed. When she was finally released, she became a symbol of the suffragette movement. She never married, dedicating her life to the cause of women's rights. But she had 3 younger brothers who married and had children, ensuring the family line continued. The 20th century brought horrors even Dorian, with his centuries of existence, could never have imagined. The Great War erupted in 1914, and suddenly, the sons of the Jones-Johnson line were marching off to die in muddy trenches. Adelaide's nephew, Christopher Hartley, named for Charlotte's long-ago husband, enlisted at 18. His mother, Margaret, begged Dorian to keep him safe. "I can't follow him into battle," Dorian explained. "Daylight, open fields. I would be destroyed." "Then the oath is meaningless," Margaret said bitterly. "No." Dorian took her hands. "I can't keep Christopher from dying if fate demands it. But I can make sure he's not forgotten. I can be here for you, for his children if he has any, for the family that remains. The oath isn't about preventing death, Margaret. It's about ensuring that life continues, that the family endures." Christopher died at the Somme in 1916. He was 20 years old. But before he left, he'd married his sweetheart, Rose, and she carried his child. Dorian was there when Thomas Hartley too was born, named for his great-great-great-uncle who had been saved by a vampire's blood so long ago. He watched as Rose rebuilt her life, eventually remarrying a kind man named Arthur Webb who raised Thomas as his own. Thomas Webb grew up with stories of the family's mysterious guardian, half believing them until the night of his 16th birthday when Dorian appeared in his room. "You're real," Thomas breathed. "As real as anything in this strange world. Your father, your blood father, asked me to give you something if he didn't return from the war." Dorian handed him a letter, worn at the edges. He wrote this the night before he died. The letter was short but powerful. "My son, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But you're not alone. Dorian Kith has watched over our family for almost 200 years. Trust him, honor him, and live a life that makes both of us proud." Thomas kept that letter for the rest of his life. When World War II erupted in 1939, history seemed determined to repeat itself. Thomas was 33, married with 3 children of his own, Michael, Patricia, and Sarah. He was too old for the draft, but Michael, his eldest at 16, was already talking about enlisting. "Not again," Dorian said when Thomas told him. "I can't watch another generation march off to die." "Then come with us," Thomas said suddenly. "Michael wants to serve in intelligence, not infantry. They need translators, code breakers, people who can move unseen and gather information. You could work for British intelligence." Dorian laughed bitterly. "They'd never trust me. They would if I vouched for you. I've made connections, Dorian. I work in government now. And you could save hundreds of lives, not just Michael." It was a mad idea. But the more Dorian considered it, the more sense it made. What better way to protect the family than to help end the war faster? Through Thomas's connections, Dorian was recruited into a special unit, men and women whose talents were unusual but invaluable. They never asked too many questions about his nocturnal habits or his apparent age. They only cared that he could infiltrate Nazi headquarters, memorize documents in seconds, and extract information from guards who never remembered seeing him. Michael joined the same unit at 18, working as a translator and analyst. Father and adopted uncle worked side by side through the war years, saving countless lives through intelligence gathered in darkness. But war always demands sacrifice. In 1943, Michael's younger sister Patricia was killed during the Blitz. She'd been volunteering as a nurse when a bomb hit the hospital. She was 21 years old. Michael wanted to abandon his post, return home to grieve with his family. It was Dorian who stopped him. "Patricia died saving lives," Dorian said quietly. "Honor her by continuing the work. End this war. Save others like her. That's what she'd want." "How do you bear it?" Michael asked, tears streaming down his face. "Watching us die," generation after generation. How do you not go mad? Because I also watch you live, Dorian replied. I watched Patricia grow from a baby into a brave, compassionate woman. I saw her save dozens of lives before hers was taken. That matters, Michael. The living matters. The war ended in 1945. Michael returned home to his wife, Helen, and their infant daughter, also named Patricia in honor of his lost sister. He worked to rebuild his life and his country, carrying forward the courage his family had shown across generations. The latter half of the 20th century brought changes Dorian could never have imagined when he first made his oath in 1723. The world became connected through television and telephones, then computers and the internet. The shadows where he'd always hidden began to shrink. Michael's children, Patricia, David, and Rachel, grew up in the 60s and 70s, a time of revolution and change. They questioned everything, including the strange family legend of the vampire guardian. It was David, the skeptical middle child, who confronted Dorian when he was 25. I don't believe in you, David said flatly when Dorian appeared in his apartment one night in 1978. I think you're a family delusion, passed down through generations. Mass hysteria. Then I'm a very convincing delusion. Dorian sat in the chair across from him. What would prove my existence to you, David? Show me something impossible. Dorian vanished from the chair and appeared directly behind David in less than a heartbeat. I can move faster than your eyes can track. I can lift a car with one hand. I don't breathe, don't age, don't die. I've watched your family for 255 years. Is that impossible enough? David's skepticism crumbled. Why? Why yes. What makes the Jones line so special that an immortal being wastes eternity watching over us? You're not special, Dorian said honestly. Not more than any other family. But Charlotte Jones saw me when I was lost, and she offered me something I thought I'd never have again. Purpose. Your family has given meaning to immortality. You've shown me that eternity doesn't have to be empty. David studied him for a long moment. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. And the most beautiful. David went on to become a doctor, specializing in rare diseases. He often consulted Dorian, who had centuries of experience with illness and healing. Together, they published several groundbreaking papers on historical plagues, though Dorian's contributions were always anonymous. David's sister Rachel became an artist, painting haunting portraits of family members across generations, including several of the mysterious Uncle Dorian, who appeared in family stories. Her art gained recognition in the 1990s, and she held exhibitions exploring themes of mortality, memory, and eternal love. Patricia, named for her aunt who died in the Blitz, became a historian. She spent decades researching the family lineage, uncovering documentation of every generation, every story. She was the first to fully piece together the truth of Dorian's oath. In 1995, on the 272nd anniversary of the oath, Patricia organized a family reunion. Over 80 descendants of Charlotte Jones gathered in a country estate, spanning ages from infants to great-grandparents. Dorian arrived after sunset, and for the first time in centuries, he stood before the entire family he'd protected. Patricia stood and raised her glass. To Dorian Kith, the nocturnal protector. For 272 years, he has kept an oath most would have abandoned after a decade. He has saved us from disease, poverty, injustice, and war. He has mourned with us, celebrated with us, and never wavered. We are here because of his love. To Dorian, the family echoed, and the sound of their voices, young and old, male and female, all connected by the same bloodline Charlotte had offered him so long ago, filled Dorian with an emotion he couldn't name. After the toast, a young woman approached him. She was perhaps 20, with Charlotte's green eyes and Adelaide's fierce spirit. I'm Cassandra Hartley, she said. I'm Charlotte's great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter. I wanted to meet you because I'm dying. The words hit Dorian like a hammer. What? Leukemia. The doctors have tried everything. I have maybe 6 months. She smiled sadly. I wanted to meet the vampire who's protected my family for so long. And I wanted to ask you something. Anything. Will you turn me? Make me like you? Cassandra's eyes were bright with hope and desperation. If I become a vampire, I could live. I could help you protect the family. We could share the burden. No. Dorian's voice was sharp. Never. I would never curse someone with this existence. But you saved Thomas with your blood. A drop to cure illness is different from the transformation. Cassandra, if you knew what this was truly like. The hunger, the isolation, watching everyone you love wither and die while you remain unchanged. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, let alone someone from this family. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Then I'm going to die. And you're going to watch another one of us slip away. Yes. Dorian took her hand gently. I'm going to watch you die, Cassandra. And it will break my heart, as it has broken every time I've lost one of you. But I will be with you until the end. I will make sure you're not afraid. And I will remember you, as I've remembered all the others. That's all I can offer. Cassandra lived for 8 more months, not 6. Dorian visited her every night, telling her stories of her ancestors, helping her write letters to family members she'd leave behind. When she finally passed in June of 1996, surrounded by love, Dorian wept for the first time in a century. The 21st century brought new challenges. The family had spread across the globe. Some branches in America, others in Australia, several throughout Europe. Keeping track of them all became increasingly complex. But Dorian had learned to adapt. He used technology now, maintaining encrypted files on each family member, tracking their lives through social media and digital records. What he'd once done through letters and personal visits now happened through the internet as well. Michael's great-grandson, Alexander Webb, was born in 2002. He was the first member of the family to grow up in a fully digital age. And from childhood, he was fascinated by the family legend. Tell me about Charlotte, Alex would beg whenever Dorian visited. Tell me how it started. And Dorian would tell the story again, keeping Charlotte's memory alive for another generation. He told of her bravery, her intelligence, her offer that changed everything. Alex grew up determined to be worthy of the oath. He studied medicine like his ancestor David, specializing in genetic diseases. By the time he was 21, he was already making breakthroughs in his field. In 2023, 300 years after the original oath, Alex organized another family reunion. This one was even larger. Over 200 descendants, connected through video calls from around the world for those who couldn't attend in person. Dorian stood before them all, the same as he'd been in 1723. Not a day older, not a hair different. He looked at the faces before him, old and young, every shade of human diversity, speaking different languages but united by blood and by the oath that bound them together. 300 years, Alex said in his speech. 10 generations, hundreds of lives, and one guardian who never wavered, never broke his promise, never stopped protecting us. Dorian Kith is the reason we're all here today. Every single one of us owes our existence to him. A little girl, no more than 5, raised her hand. Mr. Dorian, are you sad that you can't die like us? The room fell silent. Dorian knelt down to the child's level. Emma, Patricia's great-granddaughter. I used to be, he said softly. For a very long time I thought immortality was a curse. But then I met your ancestor, Eleanor, and she taught me something important. It's not about how long you live, Emma. It's about what you do with the time you have. I've spent 300 years protecting people I love. I've watched families grow, seen children become parents, witnessed courage and kindness and love across generations. No, sweetheart. I'm not sad anymore. Good, Emma said seriously. Because we need you. They say that immortality is a curse. And perhaps it is. But Dorian Kith learned that even curses can be transformed into blessings with the right perspective. 300 years after that night in a London alley, Dorian still stands watch. The family he protects has grown beyond anything Charlotte could have imagined. They are doctors and artists, teachers and engineers, activists and caregivers. They live across the globe, but they're all connected by blood and by the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, someone is watching over them. Dorian still visits each family member regularly. He attends births and weddings, though he must leave before sunrise. He comforts the grieving and celebrates the joyful. He has become as much a part of the family as any blood relative, despite being the only one who doesn't share their mortality. Sometimes on quiet nights, he thinks about that offer Charlotte made so long ago. She promised him a reason to exist, and she delivered. But what she couldn't have known, what Dorian himself didn't know until much later, was that he gave them something too. He gave them a witness to their lives. Someone who would remember every story, every triumph, every loss. He became the keeper of their history, the thread that connected past to present to future. And perhaps that's what immortality is truly for. Not to live forever unchanged, but to carry forward the memories of those who can't. To ensure that no one is ever truly forgotten. To love across the boundaries of time itself. The oath continues. The family endures. And in the shadows, always in the shadows, the nocturnal protector keeps his eternal watch. Because some promises are worth keeping forever.